Hello YouTube, Dave here again. Today I'm going to be giving you my review of Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft. Now I previously had done a full flip through of the book as well as giving you my first impressions. So this is not going to be a video where I'm flipping through or anything like that. This is going to be sort of like an audio based review, so you can sort of have it on in the background. If you want to see the contents of the book, then there is going to be something you can click on at the end of this video that will take you to that flip through and first impressions video. But this is just going to be my thoughts. It's going to be shorter probably than the, well, definitely shorter than the flip through video, mainly because the opinions that I expressed for the most part really haven't changed. I really praised the book in the early impressions video, and I still feel the same way. So, as a spoiler to this video, this is a book that I do really highly recommend, with one caveat, which we'll sort of get to at the end of the video. But before I get into the review itself, just a couple of things to just get out of the way first. Number one, these books were sent to me by Wizards of the Coast for review purposes. However, Wizards of the Coast are not paying me to review these. They're not influencing the reviews in any way, shape, and form. They're not pre-screening the video before it goes out. And the opinions that I express in this review video is 100% completely and totally my own. The next thing I want to do is just make a big correction to a statement that I had made in the first impressions video. So in the first impressions video, I had noted that this being a campaign setting for the Ravenloft setting that we had back in 2nd edition AD&D, it's a series of demi-planes that you can use for your campaign. In the early impressions video, I had stated that the domains were new to 5th edition, and I was wrong. I was completely incorrect about that, and people did let me know that in the original video, and I do appreciate that. But I do also want to correct that on camera. Like I hadn't acknowledged it in the comments, but I do want to say on camera that I was completely wrong about that assessment of the material inside of the book. Each of the domains that are developed in this book, with the exception of one that I could see, they all appeared in the 2nd edition Ravenloft Realms of Dread box set. So I was incorrect when I initially said that they were new. I do still believe that they are written by, like, each domain is sort of written by a different author, because there are quite a few authors attached to that, and I do like that approach, and I'll talk more about that a little bit later on. But as far as it being brand new material, it is revised and updated from the 2nd edition campaign setting. And even though I didn't see the Carnival in the Domains of Dread book, like the booklet that comes in the box set, I don't want to say that it is new, because there's a lot of stuff for Ravenloft back in the day that I just don't know about, because I don't have very much Ravenloft stuff. So just, you definitely want to clarify that and stand corrected, and have that correction dedicated to video. And the second thing is something I missed, or I forgot to actually look up when I was doing the review, or the flip through, and that was talking about the mist talismans, because I didn't quite remember or know what they were when I did the original video. And I speculated they may have been like a magic item or something, and they are not. They are not magic items. They are non-magic items, or like relics or tokens or whatever you want to call them, trinkets, that are, each one is connected to a different specific demiplane. So each demiplane presented in this book will give you a sample of different things that could be talismans. And what the talismans do is they are used to guide you through the mists. So they're kind of like a compass or like a dowsing rod, that are meant to steer you towards the plane that they're attached to. So, like, for example, if you're navigating the mist trying to get to Barovia, I believe one of the mist talismans was like a raven's feather. And each, like I said, each domain will have their own talismans, which are generally themed around like the torment of the villain, or what it is that has that Dark Lord imprisoned in that particular plane. So that out of the way, into the review itself. Like I said, it's going to be relatively short, because I really like this book, and I think you guys should check it out. And I'll sort of get a little bit more into that. But yeah, for the most part, it's a really well done, really well written book. Each of the domains in here, they start off by giving you the name of the Dark Lord. It gives you the different genres of horror that the domain is sort of built around or themed around. as well as the different talismans that, they can be used to guide you to them. The domains that are actually featured in this book, and that they have multi-page write-ups, they're well written. The Dark Lords themselves are compelling and interesting, and in a lot of cases, I don't want to say tragic, but just like learning their backstories and what sort of led them to become the twisted, corrupted, evil beings that they are, and the deeds that sort of led to them being imprisoned within the mists. Is really well done and really well written. So I think that they've done a really solid job with all of that. Each domain will also give you some other like key locations or NPCs that you can sort of interact with, or sort of like major players that may be within the domains themselves. They'll also give you a series of adventure ideas that you can use to introduce your players to those specific planes. So they could be looking for a specific individual or a relic or item, or there may be other reasons for the players to go in there, but it's nice to have that, the chart you can look at to give you some ideas to design your adventures around. So again, I really appreciate the way that they've done all of that. All the domains, like I said, are pretty well written. My favorite one, though, has to be the Carnival. And the Carnival is one that, like I said, I didn't see it in the second edition book, but that doesn't mean it's not, an older Ravenloft concept. But what I think is interesting about it, and I don't want to spoil too much about this book, because I do like the idea of, just sort of giving you my thoughts and recommendations, but letting you discover it really on your own. But the one thing I will spoil is that the Carnival, the Dark Lord of the Carnival, isn't actually a flesh and blood creature. It is a twisted, corrupted, like a fallen, basically, holy avenger that's sentient. And it's just such an interesting idea to have a sentient, evil magic item be the subject of like being imprisoned within the mists of Ravenloft. Now, the Carnival is also kind of unique because it's not fixed like the other domains are. The Carnival can actually, cross over with the different planes of existence, like Faerun or Corvair, places like that. So it can actually, take place on whatever campaign setting that you're running. But it gives you, again, sort of a macabre, series of performers and sideshows and attractions, and a marketplace where they sell these bizarre, like, gothic trinkets. And there is a horror trinket list, like a chart, that you can use for to fill out the marketplace, stuff like that. The idea is that the longer the Carnival is in town, the more like evil things or dark things or just bad luck that starts to pervade. And just, again, the idea of this, sentient magic item being so evil that it has to be trapped within this realm, I think is just a really cool idea. I absolutely love it. And so it gives you, I think, 17 domains that are pretty well developed. I will say the one thing about 5th edition D&D campaign settings that I kind of wish was done a little bit different is that you don't get quite as much information in the 5th edition settings as you may have back in like 3rd edition or even 4th edition. That said, they still give you a lot of good stuff to go off of, and reading these books, you would feel comfortable running the setting, but they're not quite as comprehensive as some of the older ones were. But they still give you a lot of decent stuff in here, and each of the 17 realms, I think, are well developed. They're well written. The villains, the Dark Lords, are very compelling. Speaking of the Dark Lords, one of the things I actually kind of like about this book that I originally wasn't quite sure of, I think I sort of made up my mind a little bit by the time I did the first impressions video. But one of the interesting things is that many of the Dark Lords are taken from the monster manual instead of being like unique NPCs that are developed specifically for this book. So you'll have different Dark Lords. They'll have, like, for example, one of them might be a spy, or like a high priest, or things like that, right? They'll actually take some of the NPC stats from the back of the monster manual, as well as some actual monsters. Like one of the domains, it's like a mummy lord, is sort of like the Dark Lord, or you have one where it's like a hag, a green hag. I think it's a green hag or a night hag. But it's just, again, really kind of interesting that they use the monster manual rather than rely on developing new NPCs. And you can look at that from two different sides, obviously. Like, you could say that, having the specific NPCs developed for the book is a better option because you get, something that's tailored to it. And I get that. But I also kind of like the fact that because this is a campaign setting book that doesn't actually have like a level range, having the creature stats from the monster manual serves as a great baseline that you can use to modify up or down depending on what level you want, whatever level your players are when you want to throw them into one of these domains of dread. Now, that said, I will have to admit that coming to that realization may change my feelings on the Explorer's Guide to Wildemount, which is a campaign setting book that I did not like very much because of the lack of NPCs. But I cannot remember if they actually gave a stat block to use as a base to go off of, like a knight or, an archmage or whatever, or if it just gave you like the race alignment and like their basic class. Like, I can't remember if it was like, human knight or if it was like, human chaotic neutral fighter, right? So I'll have to look back at that. But, this book sort of made me reevaluate that kind of idea. So again, it may change my feelings on the Wildemount book, which, I may talk about in a, sometime in the future. But like I said, I do like the fact that they actually, give those sort of stats, or they use those stats from the monster manual, just because, one of the things I've sort of noticed or had the realization of lately is that with like the new campaign setting books that have come out or the new adventure books that have come out, the original monster manual is largely used for random encounter like tables, as well as for like just generic fodder troops. But you don't get necessarily a lot of like actual major villains or encounters that are actually based off of just the monster manual. Instead, they tend to create like new things, which is, again, I understand that, but I like the idea of getting some extra life or breathing new life into that original monster manual book that released almost 7 years ago, which is crazy to think of as well. So yeah, and again, it's a great baseline that you can use to modify it for your own purposes. And I will say that just using generic stat blocks or generic stats for these Dark Lords, I think it might help encourage people more, especially, beginners or people that are new to the hobby. It may be more encouraging for them to like just start developing them, because they may say, oh, okay, well, this person uses these stats, but, I kind of want them to be a little tougher, or I want them to have some different abilities and, throw those in. So I think stuff like that may hopefully help spark that little creative, light the creative flame to get people comfortable modifying things. So, hopefully I'm hoping that works. And it kind of like, for me, I will say it's something that I do kind of respond to. So hopefully that works for other people as well. So, again, I do like the fact that they've actually taken that approach. Yeah, and you also get, in addition to the major locations that they give you, they also give you some sort of adventure seeds or campaign seed ideas for other realms that you can create as well. And these are like 1 or 2 paragraphs that, you can sort of build off of. And some of those, again, are from the original setting book, or they're from some of the different supplements that we've had before. But what's also kind of cool is that the first one that they give you in that list is actually tied to the Day of Mourning from Eberron, and sort of like, being trapped on this like lightning rail as it's traveling through the mists kind of idea. And I think that's really, really cool. So, again, I like that aspect of it as well. And the big thing about this book that I really like as well is, in addition to the domains that you get, the story ideas from those domains, and all that, and the campaign seed ideas for, developing your own locations. And there is some, there is quite a bit of decent information or guidelines to use to create and develop your own domains. But they also give you a nice little toolbox of ideas based off of different genres of horror. And that was one of the things that I was sort of really surprised by, actually, when I got this book, because generally I try to avoid spoilers, and this book was no exception. But I was expecting it to be sort of like a gothic dark fantasy kind of horror setting. And, for the most part, if that was all it was, it would still work, I think, relatively well. However, they actually give you a pretty wide selection of horror genres and some information and guidelines for running those specific styles. Things like body horror. So, like Alien, for example. If you wanted to run a campaign that, has a feel sort of like the Alien movies, well, that's body horror. If you wanted to run something that's more like Call of Cthulhu, you've got cosmic horror. If you wanted to run Friday the 13th, you can do, like I said, slasher horror. So I really do like the guidelines and sort of the tips for running the different genres of horror. And like I said, I wasn't expecting it to have that wide a range. Each of the domains, like I said, will tell you what types of horror they are, and they usually take two different ones and blend them together. Again, really, really well done. And this is a great resource for introducing horror elements into your campaign. So that's one of its biggest strengths. It's also probably one of its biggest setbacks. Because it is a horror adventure, or horror, not adventure, but horror setting with horror elements, and it's, designed to introduce horror adventures into your game. I mean, it says Unleash the Horrors right on the front cover. That's great for people like me who absolutely love like horror movies, horror stories, horror RPGs. But if you're not interested in that sort of stuff, if you don't like horror, you're not comfortable with it, whatever, if you're not a fan of horror and you're not interested in running horror-based adventures in your D&D game, then this is going to be difficult for me to recommend. And that's sort of the caveat to me saying that this is a really good book that I highly recommend. I highly recommend it to fans of horror, or for people that want to sort of dip their toes in the horror pool, to sort of change things up in their, like if they're running traditional high fantasy and they want to have a little bit of a tonal shift, then this book will really do that for you. But if that's not something you're interested in, it is harder for me to recommend this overall. I will say, if you know someone that's picked it up, even if you're not a fan of horror movies or the horror genre in general, if you know someone that has it, maybe see if you can flip through it yourself, because there may still be things in here, maps, adventure ideas, NPC concepts that I think will still work in any D&D game, regardless of the genre that you're trying to run it with. But again, if you're not a fan of horror, then it is going to be a bit of a hard sell, and this may not be the book for you. But if you're a big fan of horror, or you're looking to, like I said, sort of try it out in your D&D game, then there's a lot of great stuff in here. And again, there's some decent information for homebrewing in here as well, with the steps and guidelines and things to consider when creating your own domain of dread, like the villain, what sort of led to their fall, all that stuff. So overall, a very, very solid book, but it is built around a specific theme, and it's not going to appeal to people that aren't a fan of that theme, or they're not interested in that theme. So I do get that. I will say, like I said, try to give it a shot if you know someone that already has it. But overall, like for me, for someone who is a big fan of horror movies and horror, literature, then this is a fantastic book that I do highly recommend. Like I said, I also appreciate the writing by committee, because you get different writing styles, you get different tastes in creature types. That you may see in this book, as well as like Candlekeep Mysteries, for example, utilize some creatures that I haven't seen in a lot of books before, because you tend to get some, pretty standard ones in most campaigns. So it's kind of nice to see some different takes there. And from a selfish slash hopeful slash probably deluded viewpoint, the idea of having multiple authors, I think, increases the chances that, you may have the opportunity to get your foot in the door, so to speak. I know personally, I would absolutely love the opportunity to contribute to a product like this at some point in the future, be it a one-shot adventure or just a short write-up on an adventure location in a campaign setting book. But having, multiple authors tap for that sort of stuff increases the opportunities that someone lowly like me could ever possibly ever hope to see your name in print at some point in the future. Again, it's a pipe dream. I know it's never going to happen, but it's more likely if you're getting, a wider range of authors writing stuff. So again, that's sort of a selfish concession, I will admit, but a person can dream, I guess. But overall, definitely a solid book. I do recommend it, especially if you're into the horror genre. This is a really good supplement for 5th edition D&D and introducing horror elements into your game. Anyway, let me know in the comments below, what are some of your favorite domains from the Ravenloft campaign setting or throughout Ravenloft's history. Let me know in the comments if you'd love to see something like the domain of Vecna or Lord Soth appear in a Candlekeep style mystery book later on, where you have adventures that take place in those domains, which would probably be the best way to expand on this by having one of those like compilation books. But yeah, let me know, like I said, favorite domain of dread, or just some of your experiences going through horror adventures, or going through some of the different locations in Ravenloft, Curse of Strahd, old school AD&D, Ravenloft module, what have you. But let me know your experiences with the horror genre in D&D in the comments below. Anyway, thank you guys very much again for watching. I do appreciate it. And once again, thank you to Wizards of the Coast for sending this to me for being able to do this review. As you see in front of you, you also have the two different cover styles. You have the standard one on the left that you can buy at any major book retailer. You also have the hobby store exclusive cover that you can get at your local game store. And I actually really do like the exclusive cover on this one, with Strahd in the background and like the shadows and specters and all the stuff sort of moving around. Anyway, cool stuff. Great book. Definitely check it out. And yeah, thanks again for watching. I'll see you all next time. Take care.